One sentence. That was all it took. A single, unassuming phrase, uttered in a language most around her wouldn't comprehend, to utterly upend Danielle Harper's entire world. The very next day, after speaking to her grandmother in Mandarin, Danielle found herself unexpectedly jobless. What could this millionaire possibly have overheard that led to such an immediate and drastic dismissal? It was a Thursday afternoon, precisely 2:30 p.m., when the frenetic lunch rush at Juniper and Ash had just begun its slow, graceful retreat. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was a remarkably sleek, high-end fusion spot nestled in the very heart of Santa Monica, where a single seared scallop could confidently command $34, and securing a 6:45 p.m. reservation on a Tuesday evening still demanded a 2-week wait. The ambiance was a meticulously crafted symphony. Lighting bathed the space in a warm, inviting glow, music played at a barely perceptible hum, and every plate presented was nothing short of a culinary masterpiece. The clientele, mostly individuals sporting custom watches who never bothered to inquire about prices, expected nothing less than serene silence, polite smiles, and absolute perfection. Danielle stood near the bar, her movements precise as she methodically wiped down an already immaculate tray with a pristine cloth. Her black button-up shirt and apron fit her like a second skin, almost like armor. A uniform she had donned faithfully for the past 3 years. She was the embodiment of unwavering efficiency and professionalism, always pleasant but never artificial, earning her recognition by name from the restaurant's most devoted regulars. Some of her colleagues even affectionately dubbed her the Wall, a testament to her unflappable nature. Nothing seemed to rattle her. Not boisterous drunk patrons, not the unfortunate clang of broken glass, and certainly not the most discourteous customers who pointedly refused to make eye contact. Yet what unfolded that day had nothing to do with broken rules or subpar service. Her phone vibrated once, a soft, almost imperceptible hum that nevertheless caught her attention. She quickly glanced down. It was Popo, her grandmother, calling all the way from Taipei. This was highly unusual. Popo only ever called for genuine emergencies or on birthdays, making the unexpected chime particularly concerning. Discreetly, Danielle stepped just behind the service wall, finding a small hidden alcove tucked between the towering wine rack and the softly humming espresso machine. She answered in Mandarin, her tone soft and imbued with profound respect. A few rapid sentences followed. A quick check on her grandmother's health, a brief mention of a recent doctor's visit, something about a slight medication mix-up. The entire conversation lasted no more than 30 seconds. Then she ended the call, slipped her phone back into her pocket, and calmly returned to clearing a corner table. She had no idea he was listening. Charles Remington III occupied the exclusive VIP section, seated at table 7, slowly savoring a neat Japanese whiskey. He wasn't merely a regular, he was the regular. A prominent tech investor, a local power player whose influence rippled through the city. His very presence exuded an aura of authority. He craved control. He thrived on consistency, preferring to be served exclusively by the same individuals who instinctively knew to refill his water with precisely 2 ice cubes, never 3. Danielle had personally waited on him at least 15 times before, and never once had there been an issue. Until now. That particular day, something undeniably shifted. He watched her, not with mere curiosity, but with a palpable sense of suspicion. A fleeting flicker of disgust ghosted across his face, so quick it would be missed if one blinked. He didn't utter a single word. But the very next morning, Danielle Harper found herself jobless. And this is precisely where things began to get truly strange. Danielle Harper was not one for flashiness. She didn't need to be. At 27 years old, she had meticulously figured out precisely how to seamlessly blend in while consistently excelling at her profession. 5 days a week, she arrived early at Juniper and Ash, her hair neatly styled in a low puff, her face bare, save for a touch of chapstick and perhaps a bit of concealer if the dark circles beneath her eyes were particularly pronounced. She kept her head down, her eyes up and her mouth closed, unless she was politely greeting a guest. Outside of her demanding work, Danielle resided in a rent-controlled one-bedroom apartment just off Pico Boulevard. She had plants she affectionately talked to and a laptop brimming with half-written poems. Her precious free time was devoted entirely to her Popo, her beloved grandmother, who had lovingly raised her after her parents tragically passed away in a car accident when Danielle was just 7 years old. Popo had taken Danielle to Taiwan when she was a child, nurtured her on green onion pancakes and compelling soap operas, and diligently taught her Mandarin alongside invaluable lessons of love and discipline. By the time Danielle reached 13, they had relocated back to the United States. Yet her command of Mandarin never waned. It was the language she retreated to when she was alone, the language of her prayers, and the language in which her dreams unfolded. But here in Santa Monica, none of that truly mattered. What people primarily saw was a young black woman diligently working in a luxury restaurant. And Danielle quickly learned that this perception led people to make a myriad of assumptions. That she grew up in L.A., that she exclusively spoke English, that she was merely there for a paycheck. She never bothered to correct them. It simply wasn't worth the effort. "I didn't know you spoke Spanish," a guest had once remarked, having overheard her on the phone with her friend from El Salvador. "It's Mandarin," she had replied politely, and the man had blinked, as if she had just claimed to walk on water. Inside the restaurant, life was reliably predictable. Her manager, Kendra, was the type who smiled with her mouth, never her eyes. A former hostess who had ascended to the position of front-of-house boss, Kendra favored immaculate uniforms, spotless menus, and servers who refrained from asking questions. Danielle, in an unspoken way, was the favorite. She wasn't overtly praised or promoted, but she was implicitly relied upon. She effortlessly trained new staff, picked up extra shifts without complaint, and never ever caused drama. Her closest co-worker was Milo, a half-Filipino busser who had been working there for nearly a decade. Milo was quick-witted, sharp, and quietly protective of Danielle. They had forged a bond over late-night shift meals and shared stories of feeling overlooked in places where they consistently worked twice as hard just to be noticed. "You ever feel like we gotta wear invisible uniforms under these uniforms?" Milo had once mused. Danielle had simply nodded in agreement. "Like being two people at once," she replied. "One they see, one they don't." But she never allowed bitterness to fester. That wasn't her way. She had witnessed too much pain throughout her upbringing to let minor slights impede her progress. Her singular focus remained on diligently performing her job, sending money to her beloved grandmother, and steadily saving up for culinary school one day. She harbored profound dreams, even if she kept them meticulously quiet. And when it came to Charles Remington III, She held no particular opinion whatsoever. He was just another wealthy man, rude, but ultimately harmless. He consistently arrived with a different woman on each visit, spoke condescendingly to the staff, and always left precisely a 15% tip, as if he were bestowing a grand favor. But Danielle never allowed his presence to bother her. Until that Thursday, it had been an unusually slow shift. The persistent rain had effectively deterred the usual lunch crowd. Only 2 tables remained occupied. One held a couple locked in a heated argument about a prenuptial agreement. The other was Charles Remington III, sitting alone, staring out at the rain as it streamed down the glass window, as if the very sight offended him. Danielle hadn't noticed his intense gaze as she answered the call. She didn't think it mattered in the slightest. She spoke softly, kindly, neither gossiping nor being rude, merely a devoted granddaughter checking in. But Charles didn't like it. And Kendra was always 2 steps behind him, relentlessly trying to please him as if he held the very keys to the entire restaurant in his pocket. And that's when the silence in the room began to feel incredibly heavy, like something ominous was approaching, but no one dared to utter it aloud. That's his. The call lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Danielle leaned against the wall near the espresso machine, just out of direct sight, yet still close enough to respond if needed. She didn't raise her voice, didn't draw any attention to herself, merely whispered a few words in Mandarin as her grandmother explained something about her blood pressure pills getting mixed up at the pharmacy. Danielle reassured her gently, her tone soft, calm, almost musical. She promised to call back during her break, reminded Popo to drink water, and told her she'd take care of it that evening. Then she hung up, smoothly slid her phone back into her apron, and headed directly toward table 6, where a guest had just quietly requested a refill on their sparkling water. But table 7, the VIP table, was far from empty. Charles Remington III had seen everything. From the specific angle where he sat, he had an unobstructed, crystal-clear view of Danielle. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, his whiskey untouched before him. His face was a mask of stone-cold indifference. Danielle didn't initially catch the intense way he stared. She was too focused, moving from one table to the next with her usual unwavering efficiency. But Milo saw it. He stood by the bar, meticulously stacking napkins into neat squares, his eyes darting uneasily between Danielle and Remington, a sense that something was fundamentally amiss settling over him. The very air in the room shifted. It was subtle, like walking into a room where someone had unexpectedly turned off the heat without warning. Danielle approached Remington's table, her composure unwavering as always. "Would you like another drink, Mr. Remington?" she inquired calmly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply looked at her, his gaze measuring and appraising. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke. "Didn't know this place hired spies." Danielle blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Excuse me? You speak Chinese now?" he asked, a sharp, almost accusatory edge in his voice. "That's what that was, right?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, I was speaking to my grandmother." He scoffed, a dismissive sound. "Right, sure." Danielle didn't know how to respond. What exactly was that supposed to mean? "If you're going to have secret phone calls during work," he added, leaning in slightly, his voice dropping, "maybe make sure the language is a bit more familiar." She stiffened, her posture becoming rigid. I stepped off the floor, and it was a personal call. I'm sorry if it disturbed you." He didn't say anything else, merely waved her off with a dismissive gesture as if she were an inconvenient nuisance. She walked away slowly, not out of fear, but because she didn't want to escalate anything. Milo was watching her now, his eyebrows raised in an unspoken question. He mouthed, "What was that about?" Danielle simply shook her head. The remainder of her shift dragged by like wet concrete, slow, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable. Remington didn't call her back to his table, nor did he make any formal complaint. He simply sat there for another 30 minutes, typed something on his phone, signed his check, and left without a single glance back. Danielle, for her part, tried her best to pretend it was nothing. Perhaps he was just having a bad day. Perhaps he simply didn't like hearing a language he didn't understand. People like him were fragile in strange, unexpected ways. But when she finally clocked out, Milo caught her by the lockers. "That was weird, Dee," he said, his brow furrowed. "What?" she asked. "The way he looked at you, like you were speaking some alien code." She zipped up her hoodie. "People get weird when they can't label you." "You think he's going to complain?" he pressed. She merely shrugged. "Let him." She didn't say it like a dare. She said it like a tired, inescapable truth. Let him complain. Let him say whatever he was going to say. She had done nothing wrong. That night, Danielle cooked a simple dinner for herself and called Popo back. They shared a laugh over something small and mundane. Popo inquired about the weather in California, and Danielle asked about the bustling market in Taipei. She went to bed early and slept soundly, but the next morning her name was conspicuously absent from the shift schedule. At first, she assumed it was a simple mistake, perhaps a mix-up. Maybe she had simply forgotten she wasn't scheduled. But as she approached Kendra's office, an unsettling feeling already began to creep in. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Kendra sat at her desk, a folder placed precisely in front of her, her eyes darting nervously as if she had been meticulously rehearsing something. Danielle knocked lightly. "Hey!" she said, her voice even. "I noticed I wasn't—" "Can you come in for a second?" Kendra interrupted, her gaze fixed on the folder, avoiding eye contact. Danielle stepped inside. The door softly clicked shut behind her, and in that moment, she realized this was far from a mere scheduling error. This was something much, much worse. Danielle sat across from Kendra, her hands resting calmly on her thighs, her back ramrod straight. She wasn't nervous, not yet anyway, but something about Kendra's strained energy made the room feel inexplicably smaller, more suffocating. Kendra cleared her throat, then reached for the folder, holding it almost like a shield. "So," she began, her voice strained, "I wanted to have this conversation face to face because I respect you." That was the first red flag, a glaring signal. People don't utter phrases like that unless something genuinely bad is about to follow. Danielle kept her face impassive. "Okay," she prompted. Kendra hesitated, visibly struggling. "We've been reviewing some concerns that were brought up regarding your conduct during yesterday's shift." Danielle blinked, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Conduct?" "Yes," Kendra affirmed, opening the folder, though Danielle could plainly see it was completely empty inside. There was a guest who expressed discomfort with how you handled yourself, specifically the phone call you took during service hours. Danielle's eyes narrowed slightly. "I wasn't on the floor. I was behind the service wall. It was a quick personal call. Nothing inappropriate." Kendra nodded as if listening intently, but her expression remained rigidly unchanged. "It's not just about the call," she continued, her voice devoid of inflection. "It's about how it was perceived. There were concerns about professionalism, brand image, communication." Danielle's frown deepened. "Because I spoke another language." Kendra finally met her gaze, and in that single moment everything was conveyed: guilt, hesitation, and a profound, palpable fear. "It's complicated," Kendra murmured. "Some guests don't like when things feel unfamiliar." "So," Danielle stated, her voice quiet but firm, "I'm being fired because someone was uncomfortable hearing Mandarin in a restaurant that serves Sichuan pork belly and Thai curry." Kendra flinched, visibly recoiling. "It's not personal, Danielle. You've been a great worker, but this is about maintaining a certain standard." Danielle felt a profound heat rise in her chest. Not the fiery anger that sparks, shouts, but the deep, aching disappointment that manifests in silence, in looking someone directly in the eye and realizing they utterly lack the courage to speak the truth. "This came from Charles, didn't it?" Kendra hesitated, then finally, reluctantly, confirmed. "He's a major investor. You know how these things go." Danielle exhaled slowly through her nose. She didn't argue. What was the point? "You could have defended me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have told him I did nothing wrong." "I have a job, too," Kendra replied quietly, her gaze dropping to the folder. "I don't make the big decisions." Danielle stood up. "You don't need to pretend you respect me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Just hand me the paperwork." Kendra handed her a final check and a neatly typed separation letter emblazoned with the words, "Failure to meet brand expectations," in a soft gray font. Danielle folded it in half without reading another word. As she walked out of the office, Milo was waiting by the lockers. One look at her face, and he knew. "They really did it," he muttered. Danielle nodded. "Because of that phone call? I guess Mandarin's a threat now." Milo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the ceiling as if trying to contain an explosion within himself. "They're not even hiding it," he muttered darkly. "He didn't like you talking in a language he didn't understand, and instead of checking him, they cut you loose." Danielle didn't reply immediately. She was concentrating on keeping her hands from shaking. "People think racism is always loud," she finally said, her voice low. "They think it shows up wearing a hood or yelling slurs. But most of the time it shows up in meetings like that, smiling, saying words like image and comfort while subtly showing you exactly where they think you belong." She unclipped her apron for the very last time, folded it neatly, and placed it on the bench. "You sure you don't want to fight it?" Milo asked, his voice laced with concern. "We could talk to HR, maybe go public." Danielle considered it for a second. The fire in her chest screamed yes, but her heart felt utterly tired. "I need a day to think," she said. As she stepped out into the parking lot, the California sun felt unexpectedly, almost painfully, bright. It was the same sun she had walked under hundreds of times before, only now it hit differently. Not because the world had changed, but because, fundamentally, it hadn't. She sat in her car for a while, not starting the engine, just sitting. Then finally, she pulled out her phone and typed a short, concise message to Popo. "I got fired today. I'll call you later. Love you." Then, she opened her photos, scrolled to a picture of her and Popo making dumplings last December, and stared at it until her heartbeat slowly, steadily calmed. But what Danielle didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the story was about to spread far wider than anyone could have ever expected. Danielle didn't say anything publicly at first. She wasn't trying to start a war. She just wanted to breathe. The next morning, she stayed home. Popo called, worried, but Danielle assured her everything was fine. "Just a break," she said. "I needed one anyway." She didn't want her grandmother worrying over something so stupid because that's precisely what it felt like. Stupid, unfair, and utterly exhausting. But Milo simply couldn't stay quiet. That very same afternoon, he posted a message to a private Facebook group specifically for service workers in the bustling LA area. There were no names, no specific restaurant mentioned, just a simple, poignant paragraph. "A co-worker of mine got fired yesterday. Not for being late, not for being rude, not for breaking rules," she answered. "A 30-second phone call in Mandarin in a restaurant that serves Asian fusion cuisine. The guest didn't like it. Now she's gone." Think about that. He didn't expect it to go anywhere. But by nightfall, that unassuming post had already been screenshot, enthusiastically shared, and reposted on several public pages. Comments poured in by the hundreds. "That's disgusting. Sounds like they're scared of anything they can't control." "This happened to my cousin, too. Different language, same story." And then, inevitably, someone correctly guessed the restaurant. Then, someone else unequivocally confirmed it. By the end of the next day, Juniper and Ash had gone absolutely viral for all the worst possible reasons. Photos of their meticulously crafted menu were circulating, alongside scathing Yelp reviews, systematically tearing the place to pieces. Someone even unearthed an old clip of Charles Remington III speaking at a tech conference and shared it with the scathing caption, "This is the guy who gets women fired because they speak Chinese to their grandma." Danielle's phone buzzed nonstop. Journalists reached out, their requests flooding her inbox. Strangers direct messaged her, offering a torrent of support, advice, and even a few wild conspiracy theories that, despite everything, managed to make her laugh. But she didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. She needed time. Meanwhile, Kendra was scrambling. Staff members were walking out mid-shift. A hostess quit on the spot without a backward glance. One of the accomplished chefs threw away an entire tray of duck confit and simply walked out of the kitchen without uttering a single word. Milo called Danielle that night. "They're in full damage control mode," he reported. "Management's trying to make us sign NDAs." Danielle raised her eyebrows in surprise. "For what? They think you're going to leak their secret ingredients?" "They think we'll talk," Milo clarified. "Too late for that, though. This thing's afire now." Danielle was silent for a beat, processing the scale of it all. "I didn't ask for any of this," she finally said. "I know," Milo responded gently. "But you didn't do anything wrong either." She sat on her couch, staring blankly at her ceiling. "You think I should say something?" "I think you should do what feels right," Milo advised. "But just know, people are listening now." The next morning, Danielle typed something. It wasn't a furious rant, nor was it a tearful sob story. It was simply the truth. "My name is Danielle. I was fired last week from a restaurant in Santa Monica after a customer complained about me speaking Mandarin to my grandmother on the phone. I wasn't rude. I wasn't late. I wasn't unprofessional. I was just speaking to someone I love in a language that's part of me. That's all it took to lose my job. If you've ever been made to feel small because of who you are or how you speak or where you come from, I see you." She posted it on Twitter. Within 12 hours, it had garnered 40,000 likes. She was invited to speak on podcasts. Local news outlets quickly picked up the story. An Asian American advocacy group reposted it, and then, significantly, so did several prominent black media accounts. The overlap sparked a conversation bigger than Danielle could have possibly imagined. It touched upon language, identity, power, and fear. People shared their own stories of being told to speak English at work, of being mocked for their accents, of losing jobs simply because they didn't fit the culture. Danielle read every comment she could find. Some made her cry, some ignited her anger, but mostly, they made her feel profoundly less alone. Popo called again. "I saw the news," she said in Mandarin, her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," Danielle answered, a small smile touching her lips. "Tired, but okay." "You always had a strong voice, even when you were small," Popo remarked fondly. Danielle chuckled softly. "It took losing my job to remember it." But the story wasn't finished yet. Not until Danielle confronted the very people who had tried to erase her voice in the first place. 3 days after her post went viral, Danielle received an email from a name she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Request for conversation. Juniper and Ash response." The message itself was short, formal, and strikingly cold. "Danielle, we are aware of recent attention regarding your departure from Juniper and Ash. We would like to discuss a resolution and ensure both sides are heard. Please let us know if you are open to a brief meeting. J. Roth, Legal Counsel." She didn't reply right away. She reread the message 3 times, then closed her laptop and went for a long walk. The beach was only 20 minutes away, and the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing helped her think clearly. They didn't want to make it right. They simply wanted her quiet. But something fundamental had shifted inside Danielle. She wasn't scared anymore. The next day, she agreed to the meeting. They met in a small, impersonal office suite near Westwood. Roth was a man in a crisp gray suit, with polite, unreadable eyes and a voice as smooth and forgettable as elevator music. Kendra was there, too, sitting stiffly at the very edge of her seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap as if she were silently praying for the entire ordeal to be over. Danielle didn't dress up. She wore jeans, a plain white t-shirt, no earrings, just her and her voice. "Let me be clear," Roth began, his tone professional. "We want to offer a formal apology and a financial settlement in exchange for closure on this issue." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "Closure for who?" "We understand that emotions are high," Roth said carefully, his eyes assessing her. "But our client has received threats. The restaurant's reputation is being damaged." Danielle leaned forward, her voice cutting through the polite air. "You're worried about a restaurant's reputation? I lost my income, my peace of mind, all over a phone call." "We're not here to debate the details," Roth interjected, his voice firm. Danielle glanced pointedly at Kendra. "You knew it was wrong, didn't you?" Kendra looked away, refusing to meet her gaze. "I followed every single rule," Danielle continued, addressing Roth now. "I never gave you problems, never showed up late, never disrespected anyone. But one rich man felt uncomfortable not understanding what I said, and suddenly I was a risk to your image." Roth shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We are offering you 3 months severance and a statement of apology." Danielle let the silence hang, heavy and deliberate. She stared at him, her gaze unwavering, until he finally looked down, unable to hold her stare. Finally, she spoke, her voice clear and resolute. I want the apology to be public. No NDA. I want you to admit I was let go because someone didn't like hearing me speak my own language. That's it. Or we don't have a deal. Roth's face tightened. He hesitated. Kendra finally spoke, her voice cracking slightly, raw with a mix of guilt and relief. We'll issue a statement. You didn't do anything wrong. I should have spoken up. I just didn't want to lose my job. Danielle's voice was steady, unwavering. I did. That same afternoon, Juniper and Ash posted a formal statement across all their platforms. We acknowledge that the termination of Danielle Harper was handled in a way that did not reflect our values of diversity, respect, and inclusion. Speaking another language, especially one tied to family and heritage, should never be grounds for dismissal. We sincerely apologize to Danielle and the broader community. We are reviewing our internal policies and staff training moving forward. The comments were mixed. Some people applauded the apology. Others, cynical and wary, called it performative. But Danielle didn't care. She had spoken her truth, and now it lived outside of her, independent and unyielding. A week later, she sat with Milo on a bench overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean. You did it, he said, passing her a cold soda. Danielle shrugged. I didn't do it to win. No, Milo said, a knowing look in his eyes. You did it so they'd finally see. She smiled, but it was a tired smile, tinged with reflection. People always talk about finding your voice, she mused. Like it's hidden somewhere. But I didn't lose mine. I just got used to lowering it. Milo nodded in understanding. They made you feel like it was too loud. But it never was, she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. It was never too loud. Danielle didn't just get fired. She got free. And freedom has a sound. It sounds like your own language, spoken with no fear, in front of anyone, no matter who's watching. Danielle didn't go back to the restaurant business, not because she couldn't, but because she simply refused to shrink herself anymore. A month after the incident, she used part of the settlement money to enroll in a part-time culinary program at a local college. Nothing fancy, no Instagram-worthy kitchen. Just stainless steel tables, sharp knives, and a room full of people who genuinely listened. She started a blog, too. At first it was just recipes and photos of her grandmother's cherished old dishes, scallion pancakes, beef noodle soup, soy-braised eggs. But gradually she began writing about language, about the unique experience of being Black and multilingual, about what it truly means to be perceived as confusing, simply for being who you are. It took off. People wrote in, telling her that her stories made them feel understood for the very first time. One woman from Oakland shared how she had stopped speaking Spanish at work years ago because it made her co-workers uncomfortable. A kid from Fresno said he played Danielle's post for his entire class during a presentation on identity. Even strangers from other countries were commenting, offering solidarity, sharing their own resonant stories. Danielle never asked to be the center of anything, but life has a funny way of handing you a microphone when you least expect it. And this time, she held on to it. She still calls her Popo every few days. They still speak in Mandarin. Only now, Danielle answers with the phone on speaker. Not hiding, not whispering, just living. And if someone's uncomfortable, that's their burden, not hers. Here's the thing. Silence doesn't protect you. It just gives other people permission to erase you quietly. Danielle didn't start a protest. She didn't burn anything down. All she did was speak. And for some people, that was the loudest, most dangerous thing she could have done. But she didn't speak to fight. She spoke to exist. And that is more than enough. If this story hit you somewhere deep or reminded you of something you've lived through, share it. Let it start conversations, because truth spreads faster when we stop pretending we're alone.